Hi, everyone. Hello, and welcome to American Midwest Ballet's Dance Chat, where we gather choreographers, dancers, and for this episode, musicians who have all collaborated on our project Going Solo, where we combined dancers, choreographers, and fabulous musicians to create pieces that embrace the challenges of dancing during a global pandemic. My name is Hannah Clark, and I will be your moderator today. And I have gathered with me some fabulous artists who are going to talk about dance, music, and how to make those things in new and creative ways. So let's go around and introduce ourselves before we jump into the questions. Erika, may we start with you?
Sure. Hi, I'm Erika Overturff, Artistic Director of American Midwest Ballet, and I choreographed the solo trains.
Thank you. Lance?
Yeah, I'm Lance Glenn. I've been involved in all of these productions here. I'm the production manager with Ballet Nebraska, or American Midwest Ballet, Nebraska.
Yeah, that old titles, new works, that's okay. Yeah, Lanson has been here since the beginning and films all these fabulous pieces. Paul Vera, you're next on my screen.
Sure. Thanks, Hannah. I'm Paul Vera. I'm a composer based in Houston, Texas, and I contributed to Becca's group, our solo program called Dehors.
Thank you. And Becca, let's do you next.
I'm Rebecca Brenner. I'm a professional dancer with American Midwest Ballet, and I also teach ballet in the community. And I was the choreographer and dancer in Dehors that I collaborated with my cousin on.
Alexandra.
Hi, I'm Alexandra Hoffman, and I'm a company artist with American Midwest Ballet Company, and I was a part of the Dying Swan solo project.
And speaking of Dying Swan, Paul Ledwon.
Hi, I'm Paul Ledwon. I'm the principal cellist in the Omaha Symphony, and I played the cello for the Dying Swan.
And Doyle, finish us out.
Hi, my name is Doyle Tipler. I'm a trumpet player, music producer, band leader, and I was a part of the Trains.
Wow. Well, thank you all for being here so much. We've had some fun questions from people on social media and also been just generating thoughts watching these solos. For anyone watching, if you have not caught up on the solos, head to the YouTube channel where you found this live stream and check them out. There's a fabulous bank of previous works for you to enjoy. So let's start with The Dying Swan. This was a collaboration between the Omaha Symphony and American Midwest Ballet. Paul, if we can start with you. You mentioned in your interview that precedes the video that your cello teacher was very right in saying that one day you would play the Swan with an orchestra. Did you think that you would be accompanying ballet?
It's an interesting question. At that time, it didn't really cross my mind. The piece itself, the music was not written for ballet. So when I learned it, I envisioned just playing it in an orchestra situation. It's not to say that I was opposed to ballet or dance. My family grew up with a lot of dance. We did folk dancing. I played in a band for a folk dancing group. So yeah, lots of so there was nothing. When I learned the piece, I didn't know yet about the famous Anna Pavlova. I think it really wasn't until the '94 Olympics when the winner, Oksana Bayul, she skated to the Swan. And I thought at the time, oh, well, I remember that piece, and I see that ballet and skating and people just use the music for however they like, and it was great.
It's a beautiful piece, and it's no surprise that many different artists will incorporate it into their work. A standard for the cello, right? You spoke about learning it at a very young age, and now performing it with the symphony. So you performed for folk dance groups. Had you ever performed for a ballet before?
I think the first time didn't play much for ballet when I was growing up. I don't know if there was a professional company in Detroit at the time. We didn't see any, or at least my family didn't go. Of course, there was the Nutcracker on TV with, was it Baryshnikov or maybe Nureyev?
The classic, yeah.
Right, the classic. So I grew up with that image of ballet, the Nutcracker, of course, and I played in community orchestra. We would play Nutcracker music every Christmas. I did play an entire Nutcracker ballet just once with ballet, which was in Chicago sometime in the early 2000s. I was freelancing. And then,
so they had you in the pit. Yeah.
Right. And here in Omaha, we love to play with the ballet. It doesn't happen that often. I'm really hoping we get to do that with the full, real Nutcracker experience. I love playing that piece. I think it would be great. Looking forward to that collaboration. And we do some things. We've played Peter and the Wolf with you guys just maybe 2 years ago.
Absolutely. And we're so glad that you played with us in the digital space for this piece. Thank you. Moving then to that digital collaboration, right? Like we couldn't have you there live in the space, as absolutely cool that would have been, but instead it was filmed. So Lance, talk about that film aspect. So how did the music inform your choices when it came to creating and editing this piece?
Well, for me, the music is usually probably one of the most important parts of these films, as far as getting these ideas flowing and how the film is going to look and the tone of things. So one of my first questions is usually, do you have the music? Can I listen to the music? Now, obviously with this piece, I was familiar with the music, so I kind of had an idea, but hearing that music is always one of the first steps and kind of that jumping off point for me. And it kind of leads into how are we going to edit the film and shoot the film? What kind of camera angles are we looking at? Are we looking at handheld versus putting things on a tripod and those type of things? So it's really, for me, the starting point of any of these films.
Do you have any tips for filmmakers or people interested in creating dance films about combining music and film, right? About like choosing things that stylistically match?
You just have to, it all depends on the project, really. I don't know how to really explain it other than that. It's just that music kind of has to, like I said, set the tone. So you really have to pay attention and listen to it, talk to the choreographer and just start there.
Absolutely. Yeah. When it works, it is so seamless that you don't think about those conscious choices. But then when it's off, it's discordant and the styles don't match each other. It's very clear. So I love that, like smoothing and mixing everything together like baking a cake. Alexandra, you danced this piece, a classic, also in the repertoire for ballet dancers. You said that this piece had an early influence on you as well. You mentioned in your interview that you saw it performed and that like solidified your path towards ballet. Would you speak a little bit about that? Did you ever imagine that you would be performing this variation in this way?
Yeah, so when I was looking at different ballet schools to go to, I remember my mom took me to this little in-studio performance and one of the senior dancers there performed that role and I was just mesmerized by it all. And I think in that moment, I was like, I want to do that piece. But once I really started getting into dance, I noticed that I really excelled at like quicker choreography that has a lot of jumps in it. So I never really see myself dancing softer roles, but it's really a fun experience for me to get out of my comfort zone and do something different.
Wow. Well, I could not tell that it was outside of your comfort zone. Excellent job. Wow. Yeah, the idea of soft versus fast, that kind of dichotomy. I always think that anything a ballerina does is very athletic. So to hear you say that, oh, this is a softer piece, when I watching it was just, oh my gosh, how hard. Oh, I'm out of breath. So the elegance there adding that layer of elegance is, you did excellent job. Sorry, everyone. I'm not going to fangirl the whole time. I just love all these people do. So going with that theme of softness and adding elegance to something that is really difficult, Becca, let's talk about your piece a little bit on Dehors. So as you said in your interview, this piece is an exploration of soft versus rugged. What drew you to Paul's mixture of like these classical strings and these electronic beats?
That's a good question. When I think of choreography, I think my go-to is piano, string, and then a bonus if I can have some kind of like beat or electronic feel to it. And it's been hard to find something like that. And sometimes I'll do without, like I'll think of a beautiful piano, but then I don't have, there'll be something missing. So it was cool to find Paul's music because it has a little bit of both. It has the delicate piano and strings, and then, you know, our background kind of beat. And I could instantly see all these different things that I wanted to do with my choreography. So it's cool that all the notes there could inspire something like that.
Yeah, you love when you listen to something and immediately you start moving to it. That's always a really exciting experience. You also staged this in a very kind of rugged urban environment. How was dancing on point on a cement floor, you maniac?
It was, I'll be honest, harder than I thought it was going to be. But I feel like it was good for point shoes because there is a little bit of padding in the shoe. So I didn't feel like it was too hard. I will say by the end of the day, I don't still have the shoes because they were disgusting and I had to throw them away. But they were completely torn. You could see the burlap and all the glue coming out. So Lance, I
ruined
timing on that because those shoes would not have lasted anymore. But with all the turning, I think the concrete just tore them up a little bit. But I think that the warehouse, it was a good choice for the ruggedness and the feel that I wanted.
It was certainly exciting to see a piece danced in an unfamiliar environment, and the fact you could make it look so smooth while working on a very textured surface. Every time you turned, I was just like, oh, there she goes.
Harder than I planned on, for sure.
That's fantastic. So, Paul, this music that inspired your cousin, right, Becca, it is a genre bender. It's combination that I really enjoy. Did you, let's just say, so in the story of this piece, right, Becca reached out originally and said, hey, can I use this piece? Could you edit it for me? And then, you know, it turned out to be a little long. There were a couple of aspects that weren't matching up. So you said, why don't I just make something for you? So did knowing that you were writing a piece for dance influence the way that you composed it?
Oh, 100%. You know, and I had the benefit of Becca's feedback, where she said, we talked about using a piece I originally built called Talking Strings off my first album. And we talked about maybe it wasn't quite the right fit, or maybe there's a better one. And so I came up with two different options for her. And honestly, I thought she was going to take Reveillère because it's more traditional. It's a little slower pace. It doesn't necessarily have the beats and the kind of that urban feel to it. And she was like, no, this is the one I want. And she knew exactly what she wanted. And I said, okay. And then so we worked together. That piece ultimately became one that I released called Pirouette. And so we had to condense Pirouette. And that's how we ended up where we did. But it was always intended to be a dance piece. And it was interesting because, you know, even though going back 25 years when I was in college, you know, I had friends in Yale dancers. And so I had a chance to see how they did things through different forms, whether or not it was ballet or what have you. But I never actually had to stop and go, well, how would I support another artist, right? Everything I do is always about, you know, my mood or something else I'm working on. And here was a new option for me to kind of go, well, this isn't about me. This isn't about what I think it should be. This is about her energy and her movement. And does the timing of what I'm creating support that? And I like to think it did, but I'll let you guys be the judge.
Oh, I definitely think that it did. What a beautiful aspect and mentality to bring into a collaboration. All of these pieces that we're looking at today are these collaborations between artists, and it's so interesting to look at how that comes about and how that changes the creative process, working with more people. than just yourself. That's great. Thank you, Paul. Really briefly, and this is a question that I was negligent and did not ask you, Paul Ledwon, but we'll come back to you if that's all right. Paul Vera, would you share briefly your journey as a musician? Since today we have musical special guests, and for those young musicians watching, I think it's good to get tips from the pros about how they got their start and the pathways that they pursued.
Well, first of all, I would characterize Paul and Doyle as much more in terms of musicians and professionals. I had a chance to check out their work and appreciate what you guys have accomplished in your careers. I'm definitely more on the composer side. I can take a guitar and do a few things, but I'm nowhere near professional level. So I'm definitely more on the composer side, but I appreciate music and I love music and I'm influenced by so many forms, right? And so a few years ago, when my son was messing around with some of these wonderful digital platforms that you can use now, thinking of your young listeners and people, music has changed so much. It used to be 20 years ago you'd have to spend $1,000 to $10,000 for studio time, and now you can do that all electronically. And so what I was able to do is take a program and take all these different elements and combine them. And what I would say to the viewers and your audience is, don't be afraid of your creation and don't be afraid to share it. I'm on some of these Facebook groups and things with other composers, and there's all these younger folks or people who don't have experience and they're just trying to get their start, and they're beating themselves up constantly. And you kind of go, man, just do it. Just get out there. Just put your work out there. Don't worry about how it's being judged. I'm at the point now where I'm working on my 5th album, and oddly, my most popular track that I've released isn't even known in the United States, but the Japanese love it. And so you have no idea or control over any of that creatively. You just have to create, and you find ways to partner, and you find wonderful other artists in other genres, and they can help you, and you just work, man. That's all it's about. It's about not giving up on yourself and just constantly creating. That's my perspective.
That's well put. Thank you, Paul. Absolutely. Paul Ledwon, would you mind adding on that, adding your own perspective as a professional cellist?
Now, what exactly was the question?
Oh, sorry. Yes, we went on a bit. Yeah, just as what your journey was to become a professional musician, and if you had any advice for young creators who were perhaps looking to take that same path.
Well, the journey started with my family. I come from a large family, and my mom had all of us start playing piano at age 4. And then we added violin, and in my case, cello. There was just always a lot of encouragement and expectation that we would all be playing instruments. And I think my mom always hoped that at least some of us would become professionals. She loved playing. She played violin her whole life, not professionally, but in community orchestras, and she gave lessons. So she was very happy that we all played. And when some of us decided to go into music, she was very happy. So any advice? Well, you have to work really hard. You have to not be discouraged easily, because there's a lot of rejection. Going out and auditioning for orchestras, there are so many people who are going to an audition. You just have to, always do your best. And if you're doing your best, then you can't be too displeased with that. I don't know, that's about all I can say.
Yeah, just do your best. That is simple, yet it rings with a deep truth. Absolutely. Thank you, Paul. So Lance, speaking now about this filming warehouse, rugged and soft, do you have any advice for young cinematographers who are interested in making the most out of unique locations?
Well, I was thinking about this, and I think the location has to fit the film. You can't force a location because, oh, I think this place is so great, I want to shoot here. I have a lot of those in mind of where I someday want to shoot, but it has to fit the film. Otherwise, it won't work, no matter how hard you try. So I would just say make sure that it fits the project and the film. I think with Becca's, she had a very specific idea of what she wanted, and it fit so well, and it was a perfect location. So we had a lot of fun. We were cold that day. I remember it snowed the morning of, I believe, if that's right, Becca, and but we had fun. It was fun.
Oh, tutus in the snow. You got to love your art if you're going to go out and do it in a cold warehouse. I respect that. So thinking about this, putting these pieces together, right? Like what fits the piece? Let's move on to trains. Erika, we had a fun comment on Facebook from a woman named Maureen Bradley Ferruli. And she mentioned on AMB's Facebook page that the piece to her was reminiscent of this like classic Hollywood Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire era. And when I looked at that quote and we kind of talked a little bit about that, and you had an interesting story about how trains came about. And I thought it was so indicative of the nature of collaboration between choreographers and dancers and musicians. So would you talk a little bit and tell us the story about how this piece came together in collaboration with Doyle?
Sure. Well, I guess in making this piece, I was sort of first inspired by the people. I just had the idea to make a solo for Cameron. And so he works really hard. He has a lot of energy. I just thought it would be fun. And then at first I was thinking of doing something really contemporary maybe, and doing it at the Hoff Center because we have this building, all these locations. Maybe I'll still do something like that. I don't know. But I also was interested in collaborating with Doyle. We were just about, when the pandemic hit, we were just a few weeks away from reviving a show that we had done together a couple of times, Swing, 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 and he's the band leader, plays in the show. So we're really looking forward to bringing that collaboration back to life. So, we obviously, everything was a little different this year, but I thought that would be neat if we could still find a way to work together. And since he is a trumpet player, I just thought, well, I need to think of a trumpet song. I mean, I even said to Doyle, like, do you have any songs in mind? We were just both kind of thinking and stuff. And then I did actually listen to the song Take the A Train, but I didn't think it was a little bit more mellow. And so my grandma had actually sent me a CD, randomly. She told me she was sending me some jazz tapes. And then in the mail came a workout CD, jazz CD. I thought, okay, well, thanks, Grandma. And I turned it over, and the first song was Take the A Train. I'm like, oh, that's funny. That, song had popped into my mind. So I listened to it, and I wasn't, sure if that was going to work for the whole piece. And then the next song was Seventh Avenue Express, and it was just jazzy and fast and loud and, really great. And so I sent it to Doyle, and he really liked it as well. And that piece has lots of instruments. So that's not something we were able to recreate with one musician. So we figured out a way to still work together. So he played the introduction. So we were able to incorporate that A Train introduction and then kind of wove into this kind of big, high energy piece.
Wow. I enjoyed in that piece how it's like the orchestra of the imagination. You start with these two figures and one begins playing and one begins dancing, and then it expands like how most music does in our minds, where we start adding things and, oh, what if it looked like this? What if it looked like that? That's part of the magic of music. And I love that story as you tell it, Erika. It really reinforces the idea of going solo, right? This project. The name is so ironic because although we are filming individual dancers, usually, there's never just one person involved. We're never going solo in our creative journeys. There's always surprising collaborations. And for all three of these pieces, there are such unexpected influences. Even, shout out to the grandmas and their jazz tapes. And I love that. It's such a lesson for everyone artistically to be like, do not be afraid to ask someone and to follow your guts and your intuition. That's great. Thank you, Erika. So Doyle, if you would please share briefly about your journey as an artist, as we've asked our other two musicians to do.
My journey as an artist. So I started early. I always say to people that I was kind of raised in the Baptist church. My mom was church, and so I grew up in church, and I noticed at an early age that I had this ability to hear a melody and to play it on a piano. No formal training. And so I was lucky that I had a musical director at the church who fostered that and would let me play with the choirs. There was another piano player that played, and I would maybe sit on the organ and I would play like one or two notes. I mean, I'm adding little musical value in my mind, but I was able to work that into like be able to play chord progressions and then be able to accompany the choirs. And so that's kind of how I grew up. And then as I got older in age and school bands came around, I wanted to play the trombone because I thought it was cool to do this. And I was so mad because my band director looked at my lips and said, "No, you're playing trumpet." And I was like, thank you. I'm glad I don't play the trombone. So thank you, Mr. Travis, wherever you are. That's what I did in high school. I played, but I couldn't really read and read music very well, but I had a really developed ear. And so that was my saving grace. I could hear it once and I could play it better than the guys around me who could read. And so I was initially going to go into visual art in college was my thought, going into my senior year of high school. And then something happened over the summer that I just realized that I really loved music and that's what I wanted to do. And so I was like, I got to get serious about playing the trumpet. And so I picked my trumpet back up, took some lessons, Paul Ledwon from Craig Bircher over the summer before I got to college. And Craig Bircher was my trumpet teacher in college, and he just laid it into me. And I love that man. Thank him so much for the hard work he put into me my first 2 years of college. Ironically, I didn't play any jazz before I got to college. I happened into jazz because I was watching the jazz band rehearse, eating my lunch on the steps in University of Nebraska, Omaha. And they were short a trumpet player. I knew the guys that were playing in the band. And so they conned me into coming and playing. And I just fell in love with it. So it's just kind of funny that I didn't start out as a jazz player, but that's kind of how I'm known around town as a commercial player and a jazz musician. So kind of my start.
Unexpected journeys for sure.
Yeah. In terms of advice, I would just say kind of, similar along the lines of what both Paul and Paul said. It takes hard work. There's no shortcuts. You have to put the time in. And just really keep an open mind on all genres, all varieties. And there's all kinds of tools out there, as Paul Vera mentioned today, that are very, very accessible, and that you can make music. And there's tons of ways to collaborate like this. So just keep an open mind.
That's fantastic. Thank you, Doyle.
Sure.
So speaking on Swing, 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 right, that you performed with American Midwest Ballet before in the very first production. And then now this collaboration, and Erika mentioned a little bit about like you playing that introduction, building that introduction off of those influences. And then we see you on the film playing the trumpet. The little behind the scenes secret there is that you weren't playing live, right? You were doing some acting. Had you ever done anything like that before?
I was trying to think. I don't think that I really have. I think that was my acting debut. So I'm gonna get my SAT card and I'm gonna go professional with that and start a dual career. So thanks, Erika, for launching that part for me. But no, that was my first time.
You were very convincing. I thought like, oh, wow, that must have been startling to people just walking by to hear. And then I was like, Doyle's a professional. He's got it down. Because of course in film, and you have to have it recorded, like you can't just be playing different versions every time that you shoot, or else it will be a big crazy mess. So
that was the hardest part, especially the Fifth Avenue Express piece, because I had to really kind of learn some of the parts real quickly to be able to fake it, act like I was playing. So.
Oh, right, because you played that intro, but then you also play throughout the whole piece.
Right.
But that's not you playing on it. Wow.
I've never seen the music. I don't know how. I'm just like, okay, this is what's happening here. Right?
There we go. Skills you never thought you'd need.
Right.
Amazing.
But I thought Doyle and Cameron did a really good job of like having that sense of connection. So my thought, I mean, you can think whatever you want to imagine when you watch the film, but sort of like Doyle's waiting for the train. And so he's passing the time, on his instrument just a little bit, and then Cameron's there waiting too, and then the music kind of catches his eye, and then they almost start to have like a little dance music conversation, and it just kind of builds until Cameron's like jumping around and up on locomotives and all sorts of stuff.
Exactly. Yes. I love that. It's such a literal visual interpretation of the collaboration between an artist and a dancer. And that's how I want all my collab videos now. I want, Paul over playing the cello, and then Alexandra to come in and be like, and I would like Paul composing, and then Rebecca comes in and hey, and just everybody spontaneously start dancing. Even though that's not, obviously there's tons of practice and editing, and you can't just like, well, I'll just do a little dance. But in the magic of film, everything is possible. So we only have a few more minutes left, and let's switch over to the magic of film again. Lance, you filmed trains at the Rails West Museum in Council Bluffs. Little shout out to our neighbor at the Hoff Family Arts and Culture Center. Super cool spot. Go down there, check out some trains. Were there challenges for you in incorporating this landscape and balancing the light and creating the shots and dodging the moving trains?
There were actually, and we had gone down prior to when we started filming and kind of scoped things out, and kind of built a shot list. So we knew exactly what shots we kind of wanted. But then I also went down a couple other times at different points of the day just to see the lighting and how it's changed, because we used all natural lighting. We didn't bring in any lighting equipment. We just used what we had with the sun, and so we had to dodge some shadows or too bright of areas. So it was challenging, but I think we made it work. We also had to really be careful about traffic in the background, because this was kind of a period piece, and we didn't want modern cars driving in front, behind Cameron as he was dancing. So that was a little tricky as well. So.
Absolutely. Yeah. Things you don't think about when you're watching, but great notes for aspiring creators is to put in the legwork, go check it out, scope the scene, do your shot lists, watch out for the Mazda driving in the background. Well, I will wrap up today with one final question for our musical guests, which is, did any of you get new insights or impressions about the music that you performed after seeing it interpreted for dance? Paul, you unmuted.
Just in case.
Oh, just in case. All right.
Right. Well, I will say that the idea that the swan is dying is a different interpretation than the one that I myself have. And because of course in the original, it's just kind of a snapshot of the carnival of animals. And it's just this snapshot of a swan swimming around. And so seeing the ballerina dancing and telling a whole different story, it's a much different story where it dies. It's sad.
Yes, there's this. Oh, yes, please.
Oh, yeah. So that is just it's a little bit mind opening when you just seeing somebody else's interpretation, or even though it's a fairly standard ballet interpretation, it's not that standard in the musical version of it. So just seeing that, it's very interesting. It changes the way you see it.
In listening to it, that's what I love about music. Everyone listens to it and they have a different feeling or interpretation. And the first time I heard the piece, I was like, so romantic. And someone else might have a different interpretation. And then watching Alexandria put this emotion into it, and the like passing and the giving up, the vulnerability in the act of dying, it is romantic, and it's also impactful. So I thank you for sharing that, Paul. Paul Vera or Doyle, thoughts?
Go ahead, sir.
I was gonna let you go, Paul. No, I think my only thought is, am I muted?
No, you're good.
Okay. I think my only thought is, I was thinking about it as Erika was talking about kind of her storyline of the piece we did. And one of the things that I get a chance to do is I record bands and musicians in my studio. And whenever I'm recording like music with lyrics, I'm always talking to the artist about the song and what the song wants to be. And let's straight stay true to the song. Kind of take yourself out of it, which is really hard for us as musicians because we get really ego driven and we want to do all the fancy stuff, but it may not call for that. And so what I was thinking about as Erika was talking about the piece was, I didn't really know Fifth Avenue that well. She did send it to me. Honestly, I didn't listen to it as much as I should have before. And I really didn't know the exact storyline and what we were going for in terms of a video shoot presentation. So for me, I was really fulfilling the role of a jazz improv musician. I was figuring it out on the spot and trying to figure out what is this, what is my role, and what are we trying to convey to the to the audience. And so that's kind of what I took away from this experience, was following that same advice.
That's interesting. Yeah, there's always something new to test you. Wow. Paul?
Yeah, so like we talked about earlier, Hannah, I'm huge into race cars. And so when I built this piece for Becca, I thought about brakes and turns and stops and starts and all this change in momentum. And so that's kind of where we ended up, was this different vibe where you're going one direction and suddenly now you're going in a different direction. And I think for her, it really worked out. And it was wonderful to see her creativity and process come together on it. But I think it was because it was a great collaboration, right? She gave me good feedback. She said, change the twinkly piano part here. I don't want it there. Or I want more of it at the end. I want to end twinkly. And I'm like, I don't know. I'll figure out whatever that means. I'll do it. I'll figure it out. And so it was just moments like that. And so obviously I was grateful for the collaboration. And one very quick story. I know we're going to wrap up here. I went searching for cover art to release the commercial version of this track, the 5-minute version called Pirouette. And so that's what the track is now out there in the world, and Apple and Amazon, all that good stuff. And I went looking for cover art and I found a young gal doing a pirouette. And I thought, well, that's nice. And I went and found some other cover art in New York, and I ended up using that. But it turns out the picture of the pirouette is actually Becca when she was 16 years old. And it was like, it's like on Google, you can like Google pirouette and Becca's there as a 16-year-old doing this maneuver. And I just went right over, like, nah, forget it, move on. But it's actually her, and it's beautiful. It's a beautiful term, and it's a beautiful view. And so I didn't even know that about her until we had a chance to collaborate on this. And so I got to know my cousin. We had a chance to collaborate musically and through dance. And so the whole experience was just great. So.
That is so cool. How wild. Well, thank you for sharing that. And for all of you for sharing your time, skills, and energies for these projects. As we wrap up, I will ask our guests if there's anywhere on social media that our viewers could find you or follow you or check out some of your work, or if you have any online performances coming up that they can check out. So Paul, you mentioned that Pirouette is out as a single. Is there anything else or any other tags that you wanted to drop?
No, I'm out there on Apple and Amazon and YouTube Music and probably too many other places to think about, but I appreciate the plug. And yes, if you enjoyed the music in On Dehors, you can purchase Pirouette.
Absolutely. Do it. Paul Ledwon?
So I have a few recordings that you can see on the Omaha Symphony website, omaha.org. Some little things I'm doing during the pandemic. There's some videos and pieces, and also for the Omaha Chamber Music Society, which is also, I think it's chambermusic.org, or I think you can just go to YouTube and type in my name, and then all of the different ones will show up.
Fantastic. Thank you. And Doyle?
I think for me, so I'm on Facebook and Instagram, just under my own name. You can find me pretty easily. I do play with a band every Sunday night, or I used to, pre-pandemic. That was Luigi Inc. is the name of the band. Been playing around downtown, the old market at Mr. Toad's since 1978. And it was, oddly enough, one of the longest running steady gigs in the country. And so that kind of ended as of March 15th last year. So you can catch some music on iTunes under that band's name. And then also look for me for gigs, usually at the Jewel, the newer jazz club downtown. I've been playing down there under my own name as a trio or a quartet. So.
Very cool. I remember like my first week in Omaha, I went to Mr. Toad's and I saw you and I just realized that. Fantastic. Well, thank you. It was one of the things where I was like, I like this town. This town has cool artists.
Cool.
This is great. So thanks as ever. And for those of you watching, if you don't already know our socials, then we are American Midwest Ballet on Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. Come check us out. Enjoy those YouTube playlists. And as ever, thank you so much, all of you, for being here. I really, really appreciate it. And your work is amazing. Thanks, everyone. Bye.